Hi, I'm the Domestic Feminist. I'm a working married mother of 3, and I like to talk about the everyday challenges women face on the home front from a feminist perspective. Today I want to talk about emotional labor. This term was first coined by sociologist Arlie Hochschild in the 80s while examining the relatively new service industry. She was analyzing how companies were requiring their workers to do a new kind of labor, one where they are expected to induce feelings in others and also force themselves to feel a certain way in order to do their job. The most famous example is the airline stewardess who is expected to be friendlier to travelers than what is natural, with what Hochschild calls surface acting. Surface acting, in this case, makes travelers feel safe and cared for, their status elevated by the stewardess's dutiful attention. But if there was air turbulence or if someone sexually harassed her or became volatile, the stewardess was expected to suppress her own natural feelings of anger or fear and instead do something Hochschild calls deep acting, which is a way of trying to replace authentic feelings with whatever feelings will help her perform her job. She might push down fears during equipment malfunction in order to keep everyone calm. She might tell herself what a harassing traveler did to her was nothing, or tell herself to not let it get to her. Deep acting and surface acting led to a split in the workers' personalities, where they often did not know how they truly felt about something because of this demand on their emotions, which spilled over to other parts of their lives. But this demand on workers also rang true for what is expected of women in the home. We are expected to induce feelings in our family members and those around us with surface acting. And when genuine feelings bubble up inside of us due to any number of difficulties, including unfairness, we are supposed to suppress those feelings or to not let it get to us, or better yet, transform those feelings into gratitude for what we do have. In other words, deep acting is the same thing. And so feminists started using the term emotional labor to describe these expectations placed on women. But this has led to some confusion. Women have been using this as an umbrella term to describe uncompensated burdens and responsibilities such as housework, home management, arranging childcare so she and her partner can go out, sending birthday and holiday cards, planning vacations, empathetic listening, interested and invested listening, concern, advice, enthusiasm, succor, creating a magical experience for one's children. It all starts to get confusing. If this is all called emotional, does that mean we're all emotional doing the work? But if we talk about all the unpaid labor women do in the home as emotional labor, we're insinuating that any kind of labor that falls most often to a woman is emotional. It almost seems like we're saying that women do the work and women are emotional, so that must be emotional work. Like chores are just labor. Writing Christmas cards is just labor. And this is where the concern is. By calling all this labor emotional, we are feminizing what should be gender-neutral tasks. By not recognizing this as work, it is undervalued, unacknowledged, and yet continues to be demanded of us. Hochschild herself says she loves the attention these issues are getting, but wants more clarity and precision than calling all this emotional labor. So in looking at this list, I try to find themes to make some distinctions. Let's start with housework and home management. Is that inherently emotional labor? Hochschild says no, but why would some women say it is? What happens if chores are not done and home management goes astray? The woman of the house will be judged. She is the one seen as being in charge of all those things, and so if they are not done, it is seen as her failure. Even if an observer can see evidence that it was someone else in the house who dropped the ball or made the mess, it will still reflect poorly on the woman of the house because how could she live like that? How could she tolerate such unclean conditions? Doesn't she have standards? Unclean equals unfeminine. So this reality means women do housework under threat of judgment and ridicule. According to Hochschild, if it is experienced as anxiety-provoking or fear-evoking, it qualifies as emotional labor. So even though chores do not seem especially emotional, the stakes for many women mean that we do housework with a particular angst. The next, sending birthday and holiday cards, seems to have a little more of a feeling of emotion to it. Can we call this emotional labor? Hochschild would instead call this an alienation or a disenchantment of acts that normally we associate with the expression of connection, love, commitment, and not necessarily emotional labor. For so long, men have expected us to just handle the sending cards thing, or if they don't expect it, but also do not do it themselves, they are still neglecting an important part of maintaining human relationships, and so the women in their lives tend to pick up their slack. So little wonder that sometimes women complain about this. It's important to do in order to maintain social and familial connections, but it is also not valued and respected as work. It is taken for granted. One could argue that sending out a holiday family newsletter complete with family photos is a kind of surface acting, and feeling anxiety when anticipating the social consequence of not sending cards is also a symptom of emotional labor. How about planning vacations? And while planning vacations is a privilege not everyone gets to enjoy, it is still work to arrange if you are so lucky. And often a woman's job as a travel agent does not end there. As the departure date approaches, she'll be tasked with the packing, corralling of children, packing everyone's snacks and medications and sleep aids, coordinating with other families, etc. Many would argue that this is work, but not especially emotional labor. But this too could be argued as surface acting, as all this effort is to induce a good feeling in her family. All this thought, care, and anticipating others' needs, trying to provide an enjoyable experience for others. And when the woman is not enjoying it herself, probably because she's working so hard, she might do deep acting to try to make herself feel happy to match the experience she is trying to create. So while Hochschild cautions against over-applying the term, it is understandable why so many women would call this emotional labor. The next several, empathetic listening, interested and invested listening, and concern, advice, enthusiasm, succor, all fall into a demand that women freely give these services to others without expecting anything in return. The thinking goes that women are just better at this sort of thing and enjoy it. And people balk at this being called work. Jess Zimmeran wrote a hilarious and powerful piece in 2015 about this. First writing about a con artist who bilked a man out of $700,000 for love advice and psychic services to get a woman he was pursuing, Zimmeran wondered how she could get some of that moolah for herself for all the free emotional support she gives men experiencing unrequited love. Somehow, despite increasingly noisy misandry, I have amassed a small cadre of men who think I'm a good person to confide in. Consequently, I have seen my share of how do I make her fall back in love with me? How do I make her regret rejecting me? How do I change her mind? The answers are you can't, and you can't, respectively. But I've come up with enough different ways of saying this that occasionally one gets through. It's something I'm happy to do for the people I care about, but it's not effortless. I fielded hundreds of late-night texts, balanced reassurance with tough love, hammered away at stubborn beliefs, sometimes even taken shudder phone calls. What she's describing is being a really patient and generous friend, but it is clearly one-sided, and so much of the burden for her is being the go-between for her male friend's feeling of entitlement to any woman he chooses, and the woman's own preferences and agency. Zimmeran makes the case that effort like this should be compensated, but since that is not likely, then at least it should be valued and be a two-way street where she also gets a kind ear when she is going through something. What I'm trying to do for now is just recognize that this work has value. It's very easy for me, and maybe for you, to wind up in a friendship or relationship or passing acquaintanceship, especially one with a man, where labor is never rewarded, never returned, never even acknowledged. We let this happen because patriarchy is so good at training women as its proxies. We've internalized the idea that our effort is men's birthright. So is this emotional labor? It certainly takes a lot of emotional regulation. Zimmeran, although openly critical of men, is most likely tempering her words so that her male friends take them in. She's probably putting aside how offensive it is to be a woman hearing yet another man express their belief that these women don't have a right to just say no to them and be done with it. That somehow it is unacceptable and at the very least she should pay for rejecting him. It stinks to hear that common sentiment, especially from a male friend who is otherwise a decent guy. But she sucks it up, probably to help the poor woman who is the object of his affection, and also to be a decent friend. That effort is surface acting. So here we have just gone through 3 categories of types of work that women regularly call emotional labor that Hochschild, the creator of the term, would not. But I have shown arguments of why women are justified for using emotional labor as a term to talk about their experiences. However justified it might be, it still might not be serving our best interest to continue using the term as broadly as we have, at least not with more context. Tracy Moore wrote a piece for a men's magazine called The Stupid Easy Guide to Emotional Labor, in which she says that another way of thinking of emotional labor is man-holding, a word that is a combination of man and hand-holding. I love that term. I recommend reading her piece, I'll post it below, and think this might be a more apt term for a portion of what some women are talking about when they use the term emotional labor. Man-holding is the emotional labor women do to remind men to do the things that they should be perfectly capable of remembering themselves. Like, it's been a while, call your mom, and I sent flowers to your sister in the hospital, sign from you. And man-holding would address Julie Beck's point about the term feminizing gender-neutral work by suggesting that we are women emotionally doing this work. It humorously casts it in the light of women doing the work men are perfectly capable of doing because they need their man held. I think terms like these are so helpful because it injects some humor into an unfair situation, which eases the burden a bit for us and makes the pill easier to swallow for men. Another term that is helpful is the care mandate. Soraya Chemaly uses this term to describe the myriad of responsibilities women are tasked with that fall under a demand to take care and take care of others. In her book, Rage Becomes Her, I don't think she once used the term emotional labor. Instead, she uses mental labor in combination with the care mandate, which provides a distinction between management and organizational skills with care work and thoughtfulness. Another book that sheds a lot of light on these issues is philosopher Kate Mann's book, Untitled. With precision and clarity, she breaks down all the entitlements that men have of women. It really is such an excellent resource for women understanding their oppression that I cannot recommend it enough. One thing I was a little disappointed in is that she only briefly mentions Hochschild's resistance to the widespread use of the term and states her own support of its use without shedding her own philosopher's light on it. I hope someday she will weigh in on this with more specifics. Even if that never happens, however, Untitled is a great book to get insight into much of the unspoken double standards placed on women. Many of those we call emotional labor. One example is she talks about how women are supposed to give feminine-coded goods freely without expecting it in return. Returning back to the airline stewardess example, and putting aside Hochschild specifics of surface and deep acting, I think the thing many women really identify with is how much they're expected to morph themselves into what others want to make those people happy and to avoid ramifications themselves if they refuse, and that is why the term has such appeal. However, the place where Hochschild and feminists diverge is that Hochschild wants to keep the term to the inner management of one's emotions to fulfill a task, whereas feminists see it as a way to describe the expectation on us to manage other people's emotions, to make others happy and comfortable, and to perform tasks that in aggregate maintain the social fabric of society. As I said in my androcentric language video, the issue is that we do not have enough words to describe the female experience, and so this term is filling too wide an area in this void. However, using other words and terms like man-holding, the care mandate, along with more words to contextualize the use of the term emotional labor will help. If you have any other words to add to our feminist lexicon, please do so in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, check out the androcentric language video or any of my other videos to learn about the issues that affect women at home from a feminist perspective. Your thumbs up, subscribing, and sharing all help support my work. Below in the show notes are the books and articles I mentioned, plus a few others that might be of interest. Thank you so much. Have a great day.